Have you ever thought about the idea of the devil and evil in the world? Of course, one can say when it comes to evil that it's subjective, but I may consider evil, someone else might consider good. In this video, we continue exploring the book titled The History of the Devil and the Idea of Evil from the Earliest Times to Present Day by Paul Carus. Welcome. I am Daisy, your hostess. I believe that it is important to pay attention to the history of the question of evil. Seeing how our understanding of evil has changed through the centuries shapes our response to it and may give us more compassion and forgiveness for others as we look back. All throughout history, we've been labeling things, more so from a necessity of expression. And too often than not, we are quick to label, and as we learn more about the delicate nature of the mind, sometimes we cause irreparable damage, which through a slow process becomes a collective mindset. While evil may be subjective, I can't help to think that certain things seem to be evil, such as suffering, murder, rape, and the list goes on. I believe, for the most part, actions of suppression or instilling fear can be construed as evil acts, if it is intended to subdue for ill gains or a personal selfish agenda. Some acts can seem harmless, and one would not think that there is no evil therein. What comes to mind is the image of a bucket of crabs, and one crab is trying to make its way out, but the ones in the bucket keep pulling it back in, back down. Sometimes people do that to each other. When they see someone close whose star is rising, instead of cheering them on, they either secretly or overtly look for ways to knock them down. Would that be evil? And what force motivates someone to act against another person's happiness? Surely the devil did not make them do it. Or is this devil an idea, simply a personification of the spirit of such actions? The classical Greeks used their language in ancient ways to describe things and feelings. Don't know if they still use it today with such color in their language. I do hope so. The Greeks' idea of discord and destructive forces was personified in the goddess Eris and Kakia. It is said that the word devil itself in the Greek is diabolos, which means slanderer, and was adopted by Christianity to refer to Satan. Yet still, corporeal or not, where does this evil evil force come from? Depending on how one defines evil, the earliest recorded story of its entrance into the world is in the Babylonian creation myth called the Enuma Elish, which was followed by the Epic of Gilgamesh, and as a side note, it contains a flood story, which, by the way, I have both audiobooks here in my playlist. Make sure to check them out. Enuma Elish is the Babylonian cosmogony myth, the story of how the world and the universe came to be, and it is also the theogony myth, the story of how the gods came into existence. It is also the oldest combat myth on record, in which the universe is seen as a battlefield split between these two forces of good and bad, these forces of divine powers. As we get deeper into the story, it becomes clear that the emotions of hatred, envy, fear, and murderous rage are associated with the younger gods, and shows that evil is in some way intrinsic to reality and the inevitable conflict that establishes the cosmos, because the cosmos itself is brought into being through conflict and chaos, and thereupon, through combat, the cosmos is laced with evil. And so, according to the oldest written record, evil is embedded in the very fabric of the cosmos. The Enuma Elish, as well as the Epic of Gilgamesh, according to scholars, predates the earliest biblical text by several centuries, with a time difference of approximately 500 to 1200 years or so. That's a lot of time for shifts in culture and mindsets to take place, for many babies to be born. One can't help to faintly hear an echo of the past haunt the newer founded religions, as if to say, there is nothing new under the sun. In this video, we will cover the topic of demonology of Northern Europe and the Devil's Prime. The author will discuss the Teutonic nations using military power for religious conversion. No surprise, the author has a section titled Christianity Teutonized. The Teutonic Knights were best known for fighting in Northern Europe against pagan peoples rather than in the Holy Land against Muslim forces, despite that their first mission of the Teutonic Knights was to help retake Jerusalem from the Arabs in the Third Crusade, which was around 1187 to 1192 CE. And it is very sad to say, here in the year 2025 AD, the city of Jerusalem is at the center of an ongoing political and territorial struggle, with both Israel and Palestine claiming the city as their capital, and evil lurking in the background. Going back in history, the Teutonic Knights failed to retake Jerusalem and soon set up a hospital outside Acre during the siege of that city. The hospital was granted the status of an independent military order by Pope Innocent III in 1198, which allowed it to take on a military function in addition to its original charitable purpose. Later, Pope Gregory IX accepted their conquest as property of the Holy See, which they then held in perpetual tenure. Unlike the General Crusader, the Teutonic Knights were a single organization with its own rules, symbols, and a primary focus on converting pagans and grabbing land in Northern Europe after their initial involvement in the Holy Land, and especially after their failure to retake Jerusalem. One can see how 1 + 1 = 2. Looking back at history, one can begin to see how the Catholic Church slowly began rising in power, the spread of their belief backed with the might of the sword. And at whose command? The author takes us through this time in history and sets the tone by showing how the devil was perfectly primed and poised as a justification for what was to follow, the Inquisition. Please do take a minute and let me know you stopped by. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and yes, I'm as eclectic as my channel. A unique flavor for only the fine palate. And if that's you, yes, subscribe to the channel. I will stop here with my introduction and let's listen to the author's words as he tells it best. I now turn the page. The Demonology of Northern Europe. The religion of the Teutons was in the main a religion of fighters, and we do not hesitate to say that they, more than any other people on earth, developed the ethics of struggle. War, strife, and competition are frequently regarded as in themselves detestable and immoral. But the Teutons discovered that life means strife, and that therefore courage is the root of all virtue. Their highest ideal was not to shrink from the unavoidable, but to face it squarely and unflinchingly. Their chief god was the god of war, and their noblest consummation of life was death on the battlefield. They despised the coward who was afraid of wounds and death. They respected and even honored their enemies if they were but brave. They scorned deceit and falsity, and would rather be honestly defeated than gain a victory by trickery. And this view did not remain a mere theory with them, but was practiced in life. The Teutons were repeatedly defeated by the Romans, by Marius, Caesar, and others who were less scrupulous in their methods of fighting. But in the long run, they remained victorious and built a Teutonic empire upon the debris of Rome. The idea of evil played an important part in the religion of the Teutons. Loki, the god of fire, the cunning mischief maker among the Asas, is believed to have brought sin and evil into the world. In the Younger Edda, Loki takes part in the creation of man, whom he endows with the senses, passions, and evil desires. Loki's children are 1. The Fenris wolf, 2. The Jormungandr, i.e. the Midgard serpent, and 3. Hel, the queen of Niflheim, the world of the dead. Loki induced the gods to build fortifications, for which the architect, who was one of the giants and an enemy of the gods, should, if he finished his work in a stipulated time, receive as remuneration Freya, the goddess of beauty and love. But when it became apparent that the walls would be soon completed, Loki, true to his treacherous character, assisted the gods in cheating the architect. He further helped the giant Shazi to steal Idun with her immortality-giving golden apples. Only when the gods threatened to punish him did he become accessory in bringing Idun back again. The worst deed which Loki accomplished was the death of Baldur, the god of light and purity. After that, he was outlawed and resided no longer in Asgard, but he came back and mocked the gods when they were assembled at Aegir's banquet. At last he was captured, and in punishment for his crimes, tied upon 3 pointed rocks right beneath the mouth of a serpent. Sigyn, Loki's wife, remains with him to catch the dripping venom in a bowl, which from time to time she empties. Whenever the bowl is withdrawn, the venom drops into Loki's face and he writhes with pain, which makes the world tremble in what men call earthquakes. The most remarkable feature of Teutonic mythology is the conception of Doomsday, or Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods, boding a final destruction of the world, including all the gods. At present, the powers of evil are fettered and subdued, but the time will come when they will be set loose. Loki, the Fenris wolf, the Midgard serpent, and Hel, with their army of frost giants and other evil beings, will approach. Heimdall, the watchman of the gods, will blow his horn, and the Asas prepare for battle. The combat on the field, Vigrid, will be internecine, for the Asas are to die while killing the monsters of wickedness whom they encounter, and the flames of Muspel will devour the wrecks of the universe. The world had a beginning, it therefore must come to an end. But when the world is destroyed, a new heaven and a new earth will rise from the wreck of the old one, and the new world will be better than the old one. Leifthrazur and his wife Lif, representing the desire for life and potential life, remained concealed during the catastrophe in Hudmimer's Grove and were not harmed by the flames. They now become the parents of a new race that will inhabit the noble abode called Jimmel, the German Himmel, and among them will be found Odin with his sons, Thor, Baldur, Fro, and all the other Asas. Christianity Teutonized. When Christianity spread over Northern Europe, it came into contact with the Teutonic and Celtic nations, who added new ideas to its system and transformed several characteristic features of its worldview. Christianity today is essentially a Teutonic religion. The ethics of Christianity, which formerly was expressed in the sentence, "Resist not evil," began in agreement with the combative spirit of the Teuton race, more and more to emphasize the necessity of a struggle. Not only was the figure of Christ conceived after the model of a Teutonic war king, the son of the emperor, while his disciples became his faithful vassals, not only did the archangels assume the features of the Asas, the great northern gods, Woden, Donar, Fro, and others, not only were the old pagan feasts changed into Christian festivals, the Yuletide became Christmas, and the Ostara feast in the spring was celebrated in commemoration of Christ's resurrection. But the individual features of the evil powers of the north were also transferred to Satan and his host. Teutonic legends and fairy tales frequently mention the devil, and there he possesses many features that remind us of Loki. In addition, the ice giants of the Norsemen, the Niflheim of the Saxons, the netherworld of the Irish, all contributed their share to the popular notions of the Christian demonology of the Middle Ages. The very name Hell is a Teutonic word which originally signified a hollow space or a cave underground and denotes the realm of Hel, Loki's daughter. The weird and terrible appearances of the gods, too, were retained for the adornment of demoniacal legends, and Odin, as storm god, became the wild hunter. Dr. Ernst Krauss, who is best known under his nom de plume of Karlsstern, has undertaken the work of proving the northern influence upon southern fairy tales and legends. He finds that all the myths which symbolize the death and resurrection of the sun, giving rise to the idea of immortality, doomsday, and the final restoration of the world, have originated in northern countries where on Christmas Day the sun that seemed lost returns spreading again light and life. Our philologists believe that the Nibelungen contains features of Homer's great epics, but according to Dr. Krauss, it would seem that the original source of the Nibelungen is older than Homer, and that the theme of the Voluspa, the first song of the Edda, being a vision that proclaims the final destruction and degeneration of heaven and earth, antedates Christ's prophecies of the coming judgment from the book of Matthew, chapter 24. Christianity comes to us from the Orient, but the idea that a god will die and be resurrected is of northern origin. Dr. Krauss proceeds to prove that the conception of hell, as depicted in Dante's Divina Commedia, which may be regarded as the classical conception of Roman Catholic Christianity, is in all its essential elements the product of northern imagination. Dante followed closely Teutonic traditions, which in his time had become a common possession in the Christian world through the writings of Saxo Grammaticus, Beda Venerabilis, Albericus, Caedmon, Caesarius of Hasdrubach, and others. It is especially noteworthy that the deepest hell of Dante's Inferno is not, as southern people are accustomed to describe the place of torture, a burning sulfur lake, but the wintry desolation of an ice palace. That this ice hell can be traced back to the days of Gnosticism would only prove that this northern influence may, in many of its most characteristic features, date back to a prehistoric age. Dante's vision is by no means the product of his own imagination. It embodies a great number of old traditions. Dante reproduced in his description of Satan and hell the mythological views of the North so popular in his days. His cantos not only remind us of Ulysses and Virgil's journey to the netherworld, but also, and mainly, of Knight Owain's descent into St. Patrick's Purgatory in Ireland, and of the vision of hell as described by Beda, Albericus, and Chevalier Tandalus. In the last song of the Inferno, Dante describes the residence of the sovereign of hell, which is surrounded by a thick fog so as to make it necessary for the poet to be led by the hand of his guide. There, the ice palace stands almost inaccessible through the cold blizzards that blow about it. And there, the ruler of hell and his most cursed fellows stand with their bodies partly frozen in the transparent ice. Dante's portraiture of the evil demon, whom he calls Dis, agrees exactly with the appearance of the principal northern deity of evil, as he was commonly revered among the Celts, the Teutons, and the Slavs. Dis has 3 faces, one in front and one on each side. The middle face is red, that on the right side whitish yellow, that on the left side black. Thus the Trinity idea was transferred to Satan on account of the ill-shaped idols of the crude art of northern civilization. Dante's description of Dis reminds us not only of the 3-headed whore giant of the Edda, Hrimgrinr, who lives at the door of death, but also of the trinity of various pagan gods, especially of Triglav, the triune deity of the Slavs. When Bishop Otto of Bamberg converted the Pomeranians to Christianity, he broke, in 1124, the three-headed triglyph idol in the Temple of Stettin and sent its head to Pope Honorius II at Rome. Dr. Krause suggests that since Dante, who as an ambassador of Florence visited Rome in 1301, must have seen with his own eyes the head of Pomeranian triglyph, it is by no means impossible that he used it as a prototype for the description of his Trinitarian Satan. The giants. It is interesting to observe the transformation of the old Teutonic giants, who were plain personifications of the crude forces of nature, into Christian devils. Northern mythology represents the giants, be they mountain giants, storm giants, frost giants, fog giants, or what not, as stupid, and they are frequently conquered by wisdom of the gods or by human cunning and invention. There are innumerable legends which preserve the old conception and simply replace the names of giants by devils. And we can observe that all the conquests of man over nature are, in the old sense of the Teutonic mythology, described as instances in which giants or devils are outwitted in one way or another. The giants, as representatives of mountains, forests, rivers, lakes, and the soil of the earth, are always bent on collecting the rent that is due to the owner of the land. For men are merely tenants of the earth, which by right belongs to the giants. The giants envy men their comfort and try to destroy their work. Thus the fog giant Grendel appears at nighttime in the hall of King Hrodgar and devours at each visit 30 men. Beowulf, the sun hero, fights with him and cuts off his arm. He then encounters Grendel's mother, the giantess of the marsh, whence the fog rises, and finally succeeds in killing both Grendel and his mother. The parades of giant families, which form an important feature of Dutch and Flemish carnivals, may be a relic of older customs representing visits of the lords of the ground collecting the rents, which is given in refreshments while the people sing the giant song, with the refrain, "Return once more, little giant, little giant." Burying alive. The privilege of collecting rent, which the forces of nature, be they gods, demons, or giants, and later on in their stead the devil, were supposed to possess, led to the idea of offering sacrifices in payment of the debt due to the powerful and evil-minded landlords, the owners of the soil. And this notion resulted in the superstition of burying alive either human beings or animals, a practice which at a certain stage of civilization probably was all but universal and received even the sanction of the God of Israel. Footnote from the first book of Kings, chapter 16, verse 34. End of footnote. Grimm says, Mythology, page 109, quote, "Frequently it was regarded as necessary to entomb within the foundation of a building living creatures and even men, an act which was regarded as a sacrifice to the soil which had to endure the weight of the structure. By this cruel custom, people hoped to attain the permanence and stability for great buildings." End of quote. There are innumerable stories which preserve records of this barbaric custom, and there can be no doubt that many of them are historical and that the practice continued until a comparatively recent time. We read in Thiel that the walls of Copenhagen always sank down again and again, although they are constantly rebuilt, until the people took an innocent little girl, placed her on a chair before a table, gave her toys and sweets, and while she merrily played, 12 masons covered the vault and finished the wall, which since that time remained stable. Scutari is said to have been built in a similar way. A ghost appeared while the fortress was in the process of building and demanded that the wife of one of the 3 kings who should bring the food to the masons on the next day should be entombed in the foundation. Being a young mother, she was permitted to nurse her baby, and a hole was left for that purpose, which was closed as soon as the child was weaned. We read in F. Nork's Sitten and Gromberg that when in 1813 the ice broke the dam of the river Elbe, and the engineers had great trouble in repairing it, an old man addressed the dike inspector, saying, "You will never repair the dike unless you bury in it an innocent little child." And Grimm adduces even a more modern instance from Sagan, page 1095, which dates from the year 1843. When the new bridge in Halle was built, Grimm tells us, the people talked of a child which should be buried in its foundations. So long did these superstitions continue after the cruel rite had been abandoned, and they were held not only in spite of the higher morality which Christianity taught, but even in the name of Christianity. In Tomaseo's Canti Populari, an instance is quoted of the voice of an archangel from heaven bidding the builders of a wall and tomb the wife of the architect in its foundation. The practice is here regarded as Christian, and it is apparent that there are instances in which Christian authorities were sufficiently ignorant to sanction it, for even the erection of churches was supposed to require the same cruel sacrifice. And there were cases in which, according to the special sanctity of the place, it was deemed necessary to bury a priest, because children or women were not regarded as sufficient. In Gunther's Segenbuch des Duschenvogs, Volume 1, we read that the Strasbourg Cathedral required the sacrifice of 2 human lives, and that 2 brothers lie buried in its foundation. The power of evil outwitted. The presence of all the big boulders that lie scattered in the lowlands of Germany is attributed either to giants or to the devils. They are sometimes said to be sand grains which giants removed from their shoes, or they were thrown down in anger when they found themselves cheated out of their own by the wit of mortals. There is a Marken of a farmer who undertook to till heretofore uncultivated ground, and the devil, that is to say, the giant who owned the land and had seen nothing except sterile rocks and desolate deserts, gazed with astonishment at the green plants that sprang from the earth. He demanded half the crop, and the farmer left him his choice whether he would take the upper or the lower half. When the devil chose the lower half, the farmer planted wheat, and when the upper half, he planted turnips, leaving him now the stubble and now the useless turnip tops. Whichever way the devil turned, he was outwitted. The story came in its migration south to Arabia, where it was discovered by Friedrich Ruckert, who retold it in his poem The Devil Outwitted, which Mr. E.F.L. Gauss of Chicago has kindly translated for the special purpose of quotation in this connection. Quote, "The Arabs tilled their field a line. Then came the devil in a flare, protesting, 'Half the world is mine. Of your crops too, I want my share.' The Arabs said, for they are sly, 'The lower half will give to thee,' but the devil, always aiming high, replied, 'I shall the upper be.' They turnip sowed all over their field, and when he came to share the crops, the Arabs took the subsoil yield, and the devil got the turnip tops. And when another year came around, the devil spoke in wrathful scorn, 'To have the lower half I'm bound.' The Arabs then sowed wheat and corn. When the time again to share, the Arabs took the sheaves pell-mell, the devil took the stubbles bare, and fed with them the fire of hell." There are innumerable other legends of stupid devils. A miller of the devil mill in Kleinbotzen tied the devil to the water wheel. A smith, who for his hospitality once had a wish granted by Christ, bewitched the devil and placed Lucifer, the chief of devils, on his anvil, which frightened him so much that the smith, when he died, was not admitted to hell. And there is a humorous German folk song of a tailor which begins, "A tailor went to wander on Monday in the morn, and there he met the devil, his clothes and shoes all torn. Hey, tailor, follow me. In hell the boys need thee, for thou must clothe the devils, whatever the cost may be." The tailor, on arriving in hell, maltreated all the devils with his tailor utensils in the attempt at dressing them, and they swore that they would never again allow a tailor to come near them, even though he might have stolen ever so much cloth. Another comical story is told of Dunstan, abbot of Glaston, later Archbishop of Canterbury. While busily engaged in the fabrication of the Eucharist cup, the devil suddenly appeared to him. But the saint was not afraid. He took the pincers out of the fire and seized the nose of Satan, who ran off with a howl and never again dared to molest him. The event is commemorated in an old rhyme thus: Saint Dunstan, as the story goes, once pulled the devil by the nose, with red-hot tongues which made him roar, that he was heard 3 miles or more. An act of bravery is told of St. Cuthbert, Sir Guy Le Scoop, as Thomas Ingoldsby tells us, closely following the Chronicle of Bolton, expected company. But finding at the appointed hour the banquet hall empty, because the guests had been kept away through a bad joke of the inviting messenger, he called on the devil and 10,000 fiends to eat the dinner and take all that was there with them to the infernal regions. The devil came with his devilish company, and all the folks of Sir Guy fled, leaving the little heir behind, who was at once seized by Black Jim, the leader of the fiendish company. In his anxiety, Sir Guy cried to St. Cuthbert of Bolton, who actually made his appearance in the shape of an old palmer and forced the demoniac crowd to surrender the child. But he generously allowed them to remain as guests of Sir Guy, adding, quote, "But be moderate, pray, and remember this much, since you're treated as gentlemen, show yourselves such, and don't make it late, but mind and go straight home to bed when you've finished, and don't steal the plate, nor retch off the knocker or bell from the gate. Walk away like respectable devils in peace, and don't lark with the watch or annoy the police." Having thus said his say, the palmer grey took up little Le Scoop and walked coolly away, while the demons all set up a hip hip hooray. Then fell tooth and claw on the victuals, as they had been guests of Goodall upon Lord Mayor's day, all scrambling and scuffing for what was before 'em, no care for precedence or common decorum. End quote. Still, another story of saintly courage is told of Saint Medard, who while once promenading on the shore of the Red Sea in Egypt, saw Old Nick carrying in a bag a number of lost sinners. The saint took compassion on this poor souls and slit Satan's bag open, whereupon Old Nick's prisoners escaped. The legend of Saint Medard from the Ingoldsby Legends. Quote, "Away went the Quaker, away went the baker, away went the friar, that fine fat ghost, whose marrow Old Nick had intended to pick, dressed like a woodcock and served on toast. Away went the nice little cardinal's niece, and pretty grisettes, and the dons from Spain, and the corsair's crew, and the coin-clipping Jew, and they scampered like lamplighters over the plain. Old Nick is a black-looking fellow at best, even when he's pleased, but never before had he looked so black as on seeing his sack thus cut into slits on the Red Sea shore. Old Nick took up a stone and threw it at the saint, but Saint Medard was remarkably hard and solid about the parietal bone. The stone recoiled, and it curled, and it whirled in the air, as this great big stone at a tangent flew, just missing his crown. It at last came down, plump upon Nick's orthopedical shoe. It smashed his shin, and it smashed his hoof, notwithstanding his stout orthopedical shoe, And this is the way that, from that same day, Old Nick became what the French call Boulou. End of quote. One of the oldest triumphs of human skill in bridge building gave rise to the marking of the Devil's Bridge, which boldly overspans the yawning gorge of the Reuss, where the mountain road passes up to the Furka of St. Gothard. A new bridge has been built by engineers of the 19th century right above the old one, but the old one remained for a long time in its place until it broke down in recent years. The legend goes that a shepherd lad engaged the devil to build the bridge on the condition that the soul of the first living creature that crossed it should be forfeited. When the work was finished, the lad drove a chamois over the bridge, which, seeing that he was cheated out of the price he had expected, the devil wrathfully tore into pieces. All these stories are Christianized pagan notions of evil conquered either through cleverness and wit or by divine assistance. And even the church doctrines of sin and salvation are based upon the pre-Christian conceptions, ultimately dating back to human sacrifices and the mysteric rites of cannibalism, in which man hoped to partake of divinity and immortality by eating the flesh and drinking the blood of his incarnated God or his representative. The Christian scheme of salvation may be briefly called the vicarious atonement of man's sin through the blood of Christ. God's wrath upon the guilty human race is purified through the sufferings and death of the innocent God-man. Divine justice is justified by the sacrifice of divine love. The mystery of this doctrine, and also of the doctrine of original sin, which in its literal sense can hardly be regarded as commendable, has a deep sense which appears when we consider the organic unity of the human race. We not only inherit the evil consequences of our ancestors' evil deeds, but we actually consist of their evil disposition themselves. Thus the sin of our fathers is our curse, because it is our own, and in the same way, the merit of our brothers becomes, or may become, our own blessing. We can easily share in the benefit that will accrue from inventions or other advances made by one man if we are only willing to accept the lesson which his example teaches. The idea of a salvation through vicarious atonement has grown dimmer of late. The old interpretation reminding us of the bloody sacrifices of savages is beginning to wane, although it can scarcely be regarded as entirely abandoned. It is not surrendered, but merely transformed, and may now be called the idea of salvation through sacrifice. The Devil's Prime. Miracles and Magic. A Latin proverb says, "If two do the same thing, it is not the same thing." And this is true not only of individuals, but also of nations and of religions. It is a habit common all classes of people to condone the faults of their own kind, but to be severe with those of others. The oracles of Delphi were divine to a Greek mind, but they were of diabolical origin according to the judgment of Christians. Jesus was a magician in the eyes of the pagans, while the Christians worshipped him as the Son of God and a man who performed miracles. The priests of Pharaoh and Moses performed the same tricks still performed by the snake charmers of Egypt and India, but the deeds of Moses alone are regarded as miracles, and the Israelites claim that he could accomplish more than the Egyptians. Father Juan Bautista of about 1600 tells us that among the natives of Mexico there are magicians who conjure the clouds and can make a stick look like a serpent, a mat like a centipede, a stone like a scorpion, and similar deceptions. Simon Magus and his disciples were believed by the early Christians to possess power over demons, but Simon was a competitor of the apostles, and therefore his deeds were not regarded as divine. Before an impartial tribunal, the methods and aspirations of both parties would resemble one another more than the one-sided statements of Christian authors at first sight seem to warrant. The accusation made against Simon by Luke of having offered money to the apostles for communicating to him the Holy Ghost does not prove a depravity of heart, as the later Christians thought, for Simon took the rebuke in the proper spirit and apparently remained on good terms with the apostles. The reports of the church fathers, which make Peter and Simon rivals in working miracles, developed the story in the spirit of the age. They characterize the superstitions of the time, yet, although they probably reflect historical facts, they are unreliable, as are the charges of pagan authors hurled against the Christians. The early Christians practiced healing the sick by the laying on of hands and by praying. So did the Therapeutae and other Gnostics, yet faith cure and Christian Science are not countenanced by the churches today. Minucius Felix puts the common notions which in his days prevailed in Greece and Italy concerning the practices of the Christians into the mouth of Caecilius, who describes them as a desperate class of vulgar men and credulous women threatening the welfare of mankind. He states that they are atheists, for they cherish a contempt for temples, spit on the gods, and ridicule religious ceremonies, that their own cult is a mixture of superstition and depravity, that they possess secret symbols by which they recognize one another. They call themselves brothers and sisters and degrade these sacred words by sensuality. Further, it is said that they adore a donkey's head and that their worship is obscene. The libel culminates in the assertion that the reception of new members is celebrated by slaughtering and devouring a child covered all over with flour, which is an obvious perversion of the communion. But Caecilius declares that it is done because partnership in guilt is the best means of securing secrecy. Lastly, he adds that on festival days they celebrate love feasts, which, after the extinction of the lights, end with sexual excesses. Similar accusations are found in various authors, and even the noble-hearted and high-minded Tacitus speaks of the Christians with contempt, while on the other hand, the Christians do not shrink from ridiculing the holiest and noblest of paganism. For instance, Minucius Felix, a Christian of the highest type and best education, speaks of Socrates as the Athenian buffoon. Justinus Martyr, in his Apologia, makes the asseveration that the Christians are innocent, but leaves the question open whether the heretics, such as the Gnostics, might not be guilty of these abominations. And Eusebius directly claims that the practices that prevailed among the heretics were the direct cause of the evil rumors concerning the life of the Christians. While we must bear in mind that the moral rigidity of the Gnostics leaves upon the whole no doubt about the purity of their life, we may grant the probability of the presence of black sheep among them, but the same is true of the Christians, as we know for certain on the good authority of St. Paul, who in his first epistle to the Corinthians, after an enumeration of such sinners as will not inherit the kingdom, verse 8 through 11, the passage had better remain unquoted, says, "And such were some of you." Accordingly, there can be no doubt that there were abuses in the Church of Corinth. St. Paul believes the rumor of a sin that is not so much unnamed among the Gentiles, and the second epistle is the best evidence that the Corinthians did not deny the facts. They repent, whereupon St. Paul recommends charity toward the main offender in the second book of Corinthians chapter 2 verse 6 through 11, saying, "To whom ye forgive anything, I forgive also." The various aberrations among the Christians, which were very apparent in many of their most prominent leaders, such as Constantine the Great, must not astonish us, because Christianity originated in an age of unrest, and the new movement was the center of attraction for all kinds of eccentricity. In spite of various excrescences, we cannot but say that Christianity opened to the world new vistas of truth. represented by such men as St. Paul, it tended toward purity of heart. But the same is true of the Gnostics and the Manichees. The accusations on both sides rest mainly upon partisan statements and cannot be trusted, or at least must be used with due reserve. But it is natural that here, as always, the same things are no longer the same when reported of people of another faith. Thus the virtues of the pagans are to St. Augustine only polished vices, and the heroism of Christian martyrs is mere obstinacy in the opinion of Roman praetors. We look with contempt upon the Indian prophet who poses as a rainmaker, but read the story of Elijah with great edification, and while we justify the holy zeal of the latter, we would make no allowance for the severity of Indian reformers who failed to spare the lives of their rivals. One instance will suffice. Tenskwatawa, the Shawano prophet, preached in the beginning of the 19th century a nobler religion and a purer morality to the tribes of the prairie, and was revered by his followers as an incarnation of Manaboso, i.e., first doer. Drunkenness, the besetting sin of the Indians since their acquaintance with the whites, and the traditional superstition practiced by the medicine men ceased. But reform was coupled with persecution. Tenskwatawa inaugurated a crusade against all who were suspected of dealing in witchcraft or magical arts. And he took advantage of the faith of his followers to effectually rid himself of all who opposed his sacred claims. All his rivals were successively marked by the prophet and doomed to be burned alive. All these facts are so many instances which prove the truth of the proverb that if two do the same thing, it will not be regarded as the same thing. And thus the miracle of our own religion is mere magic and witchcraft in other religions. One of the most characteristic features of the pre-scientific age is man's yearning for the realization of that which is unattainable by natural means. The belief in magic will inevitably prevail so long as the dualistic world conception dominates the minds of the people, and in that period of civilization, supernatural deeds are expected as the indispensable credentials of all religious prophets. It is the age of miracles and witchcraft. Now we know that wherever contranatural things are believed, there the strangest events will be experienced by those who are under the suggestion of the belief, and then at once a competition will originate between those who represent the established religion and others who perform or pretend to perform similar deeds. The former are prophets and saints, and they work miracles. The latter are wizards and witches, and their art is called witchcraft. Miracles and witchcraft possess this in common, that both are supposed to supersede the laws of nature, but there is this difference, that the miracle is believed to be the supernatural power of one's own religion, while witchcraft is the miracle of heretics. Miracle is anything contranatural that is legitimate, and witchcraft is the same thing but illegitimate. The former is supposed to be done with the help of God, the latter with the help of Satan. The former is boasted of as the highest glory of the church. The latter is denounced as the greatest abomination possible. It is natural that wizards and witches are always represented as obnoxious, and it is said that their art is practiced to injure the welfare of mankind. Nevertheless, some very mean deeds are counted as miracles, while good deeds, if only performed by believers in other gods, are branded as witchcraft. Footnote: there are miracles attributed in the Christian Apocrypha even to Jesus himself, which would be criminal. End of footnote. Moreover, all priests are unanimous in condemning the application of charms and spells, except those of their own religion, even though they used for the best and purest ends. A faith cure by heretics, and even a successful operation through the unusual skill of a surgeon, would be set down as deeds of darkness by those who believe in a religion of miracles, but official processions with prayers and sprinkling of holy water are still employed, as could be observed during a late smallpox epidemic in French Canada. Footnote: in 1521, a surgeon of Hamburg was executed for witchcraft because he had saved the life of a babe, which the midwife had given up as lost. End footnote. The belief in magic is a natural phase in the evolution of mankind, producing the medicine man who dispels diseases by charms, the prophet who, by an appeal to his deity, be it the sun god of the American Indians or the Baal of the Phoenicians or El or Yahweh of the Israelites, undertakes to make rain, and the medium who vaticinates or foretells fortunes and calls the dead from spirit land. The rain priests play a most important part in the life of all the American Indians. The snake dance among the Pueblo Indians of Mexico is a prayer for rain. Frequently the sun is invoked for rain. Dreams, visions, and ecstasies are regarded as the best means of divine revelation, and the medicine bag possesses magic powers. The devotional spirit is not less intense among the pagans of the prairie than it was among the ancient Israelites and the early Christians. All attempt to practice magic and a religion that promises success in life and proposes to accomplish the salvation of man by miracles, be it the miracles of their founders or the continued miracles of church institutions, such as sacraments, pilgrimages, sprinkling of holy water, mass reading, or other rites supposed to possess other than a purely symbolical significance, is a religion of magic. In brief, a religion of magic is based on a belief in the contra-natural, and as soon as a religion of magic becomes an established institution, it will develop the notion of witchcraft by a discrimination between its own miracles and those of other people who are unbelievers. How similar the notions of legitimate and illegitimate miracles are may be learned from the writings of Agrippa of Netesheim, 1486-1535, one of the greatest sages and philosophers of the age of the Reformation, who proclaimed that the perfection of philosophy could be attained by magic, which, in distinction to black magic, he called natural or celestial magic, and which, he assumed, leads to a perfect union with God. His book, De Occulta Philosophia, written in 1510, but published only in 1531, exhibits his belief in the possibility of creating hatred and love by spells, of discovering thieves, confounding armies, making thunderstorms and rain, all of which he expects to accomplish by magic through a mystical union with God. It is difficult for us to understand how a man of his caliber could believe in the efficacy of spells and mystic keys. But grant the reality of magic, and such aberrations become legitimate experiments. Witches have been frequently accused of the very same feats, only they were said to have performed them through the assistance of the devil. In spite of the resemblance which Agrippa unconsciously had discovered between witchcraft and miracles, he remained unmolested, for his views were at the time commonly accepted. Nor would he ever have excited the hostility of the papal party had he not lectured with fervor at the University of Dole, Burgundy, 1509, on Reuchlin's book, De Verbo Mirifico, and had he not, in 1519, when syndic at Metz, ventured to save the life of a witch that had fallen into the hands of the Inquisitor Nicholas Savini. What a strange mixture of occultism with exact observation based upon anatomical measurements is contained in the chapter on the proportions of the human body. Mathematics, natural science, and mysticism are all combined in Agrippa's Occulta Philosophia, and the learned author is unable to discriminate between facts and fancy. Agrippa's celestial magic is not different from black magic, for both kinds of magic consist in the hope of contra-natural accomplishments. When, after years of varied disappointments, Agrippa discovered that there was no magic, be it black or white, he came to the conclusion that there was no science. As the agnostic who, after having wrongly formulated the problems of philosophy and finding his mind hopelessly entangled in confusion, pronounces the dreary doctrine of the impossibility of knowledge. So Agrippa of Teneshim began to despair not only of magic, but also of science, and he wrote in 1526 his proposition about the incertitude and vanity of the science and arts, and about the excellence of the Word of God. All in all, we find that a religion of magic involves a belief in witchcraft, where the sacraments are employed as exorcisms. Every attempt at exercising extraordinary powers is regarded not as impossible, but as a lack of loyalty. Hence, heresy and witchcraft are always declared to be closely allied, for witchcraft is nothing but the performance of miracles without the license of an established church, which claims to have a monopoly in supernaturalism. The belief in and the prosecution of witchcraft are the necessary result of a firmly established religion of magic. All the religions of magic are naturally intolerant. As soon as one of them triumphs over its rivals, as soon as it is worked out into a systemic creed and organized in an institution such as the church, it will, like all combinations or trusts, with all means at its command, ensure and perpetuate its supremacy. Considering that the medieval church was practically a religion of magic, witch prosecution was the inevitable result of the Pope's ascendancy, and it continued in Protestant countries as an heirloom of the Dark Ages so long as the belief in magic was retained. Exorcism. The belief in Satan, as held by many Christians today, is harmless and tame in comparison with the old conception, which was taken seriously. Satan, it is true, was regarded as the foe of mankind, but there was no doubt about his power, and the idea prevailed that his services could easily be procured by those ready to surrender to him their souls. As soon as the church became possessed of power, it was at once bent on the suppression of magic and witchcraft. Constantine began the policy of threatening the severest punishment on all kinds of black art, allowing its application only for curing diseases and preventing hail and rainstorms during the harvest. And Constantine's successors did not fail to preserve the tradition. A prohibition to fish implies that there is good fishing, which tempts many to try. In the same way, the policy of the Christian authorities was tantamount to an official recognition of witchcraft as a mighty and powerful weapon that could be wielded by the initiated both for good and for evil, and thus it could not fail to strengthen the devil's credit, as well as to develop the most exuberantly peculiar medieval demonology. Belief in witchcraft rapidly became so common that almost all countries were in possession of laws against magicians, soothsayers, and witches. One remarkable exception only is found in the Law Code of Lombards, which contains the declaration that witches cannot perform any such feats as devouring people alive, and therefore the burning of a woman on the pretext of her being a witch is prohibited. There is a remarkable Latin book of dialogues on the life and miracles of the Italian fathers, which characterizes the superstitious spirit that prevailed among both the laity and the clergy. It is replete with all kinds of ridiculous tales which are taken in good earnest. We are told, for instance, that Gregory the Great, when consecrating an Arian church for Roman Catholic worship, successfully exorcised the devil with the help of a sacred relics. Satan flew before him in the shape of a huge pig and vacated the place completely the following night with great noise. The devil came more and more into prominence in the 8th and 9th centuries. Baptism was regarded as an expulsion of the evil spirit. The convert had, according to Dionysius, to exhale 3 times, and according to the Greek euchologian, also to spit at him upon the floor. The Synod of Leptinae in the year 743 added to the confession of faith and a renunciation of the devil. A Low German formula which renounces the 3 foremost German deities with all their hosts consists of questions and answers which read as follows. Question. Forsakest thou the devil? Answer. I forsake the devil. Question. And all devils' guilds? Answer. And I forsake all devil guilds. Question. And all devil works? Answer. And I forsake all devil works and words, Thonar, Thor, and Wodan, and Saxnot, Fro, and all the evil ones that are his companions. The fact is that Christianity itself was regarded as a kind of magic which, in distinction to the black magic or necromancy, would have to be classed together with white magic. The sacraments were supposed to be miraculous methods of performing supernatural feats, quite analogous to exorcisms, and the church itself was, in the minds of the people, an institution of sacred sorcery. Belief in witchcraft. With the belief in witchcraft, a new period begins in the evolution of mankind. The devil becomes greater and more respected than ever. Indeed, this is the classical period of his history and the prime of his life. Contracts were made with the devil in which men surrendered their souls for all kinds of services on his part. In the 19th century, the devil reached the acme of his influence, and it is only possible to give a meager sketch of the devil's activity during this period. Nothing extraordinary could happen without it's attributed to him, and to the people of the Middle Ages, many things ordinary to us were very extraordinary. Gervasius Tiberiensis composed a collection of stupid fables which he published in 1211 under the title Otia Imperialia, dedicating them to Emperor Otto IV. He repeats some spook stories of Apuleius as events that happened in France and England, and invents new tales which surpass the old ones only in crudity. He accepts the medical explanation of nightmares as due to an overheated imagination, but proves even then the presence of demoniacal influence on the authority of St. Augustine. In the Dialogus Miracolorum by Caesarius von Heisterbach, who died about 1245, we find that not only thunderstorms, hailstorms, inundations, diseases, but also unexpected noises, the rustling of leaves, the howling of the wind, were attributed to Old Nick. He appears as a bear, a monkey, a toad, a raven, a vulture, as a gentleman, a soldier, a hunter, a peasant, a dragon, and a Negro. Caesarius's book has become famous, and rightly so, not on account of any peculiar merit of its author, but because it is a true picture of the average conception of the times. The book is written mainly for the instruction of young monks. The initials of the original editions are emblazoned with pious pictures, and the tendency of all stories is that there is no surer salvation than in the brotherhood of the Cistercian monks, the order to which the author belongs. He declares that there is no safer road than the order of the Cistercians, nor do fewer people go down to the lower regions than the members of that religion. Caesarius makes the Lord appear as a sovereign who regards it as his duty to protect his faithful servants and takes an interest in concealing their crimes. He works a special miracle lest the slander of clergymen becomes public. In the first book, chapter 1, page 23, the devil, having caused a man to sin against the sixth commandment, is unable to accuse and punish the sinner or make his guilt known because the latter escapes all evil effects through the confessional. The devil once went to a confessor and confessed. Having enumerated his sins, the confessor declared that 1,000 years would not have sufficed to commit them all, and the devil answered that indeed he was much older than 1,000 years, for he was one of the demons who fell with Lucifer. The priest considered his sins unpardonable and asked him whether he wanted to do penance. "Yes," he said, "if the penance is not too heavy for me." "Well," replied the confessor, "bow down thrice a day, saying, 'God, my Lord and Creator, I have sinned against thee, forgive me.'" "No," said the devil, "that would be too humiliating for me." Arrogance and self-conceit are the mainsprings of Satan's character. A curious parallel to Peregrinus is the story of a woman who, for the sake of clearing her soul of sin, burns herself to death. Imps are seen playing with cupids upon the train of a gentlewoman. A man gambles with the devil and loses his soul in chapter 5, page 34. The theory of incubi and succubus is presented in all its indecency on the authority of St. Thomas Aquinas, who in his commentary on Job, chapter 40, interprets Behemoth, a large animal, probably the elephant, as the devil, and derives from the mention of the animal's sexual strength, verse 16, the theory that evil demons can have intercourse with human beings. Satan is supposed to serve first as a succubus or female devil to men, and then as an incubus or male devil to women. And St. Thomas declares that children begotten in this way ought to be regarded as the children of the men whom Satan served as succubus. They would, however, be more cunning than normal children on account of the demoniacal influence to which they are exposed in their prenatal condition. Matthias Paris mentions that within 6 months, one such incubus baby developed all its teeth and attained the size of a boy of 7 years, while his mother became consumptive and died. The superstitions of the belief in the personal interference of the devil with human affairs passed away, but they left us an extensive and interesting literature which, for all time to come, will remain a rich mine for the anthropologist, the antiquarian, the historian, the psychologist, the poet, and the philosopher. There are innumerable miracles and tales of St. Mary, the mother of Jesus, but few of them are endurable, while the general tone of the narration is unworthy of any woman, let alone the highest woman ideal of Christianity. A dog has been baptized by rascals, and he turns mad. In the hour of death, pious people see the heavens open while infidels are tortured by black men, ravens, and vultures. And for the edification of the faithful, the damned are thrown into the crater of a volcano. The abbot Ricklemus, who wrote about 1270 a book of revelations about the intrigues and persecutions of demons, recognizes the devil's hand in every little inconvenience he might happen to experience. It is devils that make him feel qualmish when he has eaten too much. They make him fall asleep over his breviary. When he exposes his hand, they make it feel chilly. When he hides it under his cloak, they tickle it and bite it like fleas. Once, he says, when we were gathering stones for building a wall, I heard a devil exclaim, "What tiresome work!" He only did it to tempt us and make us rebellious. There is no noise, but some devil speaks out of it. While I pull my sleeve, he says, a rustling is heard, and devils speak through this sound. When I scratch myself, the scratching is their voice. Lowly people are mostly seduced by anger and sadness, but the rich and powerful by arrogance and pride. Another favorite conception of Christianity originated in the Roman idea of looking upon religion as a legal affair. It must have been a lawyer who made that happy hit of presenting the case of Satan versus mankind or versus Christ juridically in the form of a regular lawsuit in which, of course, Satan in the end is worsted. The booklet, which bears the title Processus Satanae, became so popular that it was repeatedly edited by various authors and is still extant in various redactions, one of the best and oldest being the Bartolus, a lawyer who lived from 1313 through 1355. The devil played the role of a joker in the Passion plays, and his part became more and more prominent. In France, the idea prevailed that the great mysteries should always have not less than 4 devils, a usage which is mentioned in Rabelais, hence the proverb, faire les diables à quatre. In medieval mysteries, God the Father, God the Son, and Satan appear on the stage, and the last one is practically the main actor in the whole drama. He was the intriguer who, after his successful revolution against the Lord, set up an empire of his own in hell, and without the devil's intrigues, the whole plot of man's fall and Christ's salvation would be impossible. The works of Caesarius, of Heisterbach, Rickelmus, Bartolus, and others are by no means the only ones that treat on devil lore. They are typical of a large class of similar liturgy productions. While the Church in her struggles for supremacy, aspiring for worldly power, began to neglect her spiritual duties, people sought comfort in sex. The Manichees increased. Catharism spread rapidly, and many new sects, such as Albigenses, were founded. Almost all sectarians were normally earnest and sincere, yet the general character of these sects was similar to the Manichees, and openly avowed dualism. The tendencies of the time were dualistic, and the Church also was under the influence of dualistic views. Nevertheless, Orthodox Christianity, at least in her noblest expositors, such as Thomas Aquinas and other Christian philosophers, never lost sight of the monistic ideal, in spite of all its demonological errors. The demonology of the Middle Ages was at the bottom a mythical excrescence, for the devil's power was all the time regarded as a mere sham, as blend work. He still served the higher purpose of the omnipotent God, who used him for his wise and well-calculated ends. Thus it was a natural consequence that the devil appeared in spite of his smartness as the dupe of God. His fate was always to be defeated and ridiculed. As such, he figures in the mysteries, the Easter and Christmas plays, in which he acts one of the most important parts, that of intriguer, harlequin, and fool. Kindred superstitions. Belief in witchcraft was only the main result of the established authority of a religion of magic involving the belief in a personal devil. There are other consequences which, though less important, are sometimes bad enough in themselves. We mention a few of them. 1. There were persons who actually tried to make contracts with the devil. 2. People possessed of a lively imagination began to dream that they stood in all kinds of relations to the evil one. There are cases in which imaginary witches surrendered themselves voluntarily to the Inquisition. 3. Soldiers entertained the hope of rendering themselves bulletproof. 4. Many methods were devised to predict the future. 5. There were plenty of fools who tried to become rich by magic. And 6, worst of all, men who knew better than the self-constituted guardians of the right faith were relentlessly persecuted even unto death. The devil was believed to hold court and to celebrate witches' Sabbaths, on which occasions homage was paid him and the Christian sacraments were travestied with diabolical malice. The most remarkable case of bestial demonolatry, with all its incidental crimes, is recorded in the annals of Francier or Giles de Rais, also spelled Rays and Retz. One of the greatest dignitaries of the state, a descendant of the highest noble families of Brittany, and a marshal of France, was charged with kidnapping about 150 women and children, who, after being subjected to all kinds of outrages, were solemnly sacrificed to Satan. The facts seem impossible, but the complete records of the case are still extant, according to which Rais was convicted and executed in 1440. Footnote: see Encyclopedia Britannica, Volume 20, page 258. The history of his life has apparently contributed to the formation of the legend of Bluebeard. Among the persons who gave themselves up to the Inquisition was mentioned Catherine Young of Armdorf, Hesse, who confessed to her own father that she was a witch. The poor man regarded it as his duty to denounce her, and after 10 days, on May 11th, 1631, the girl was executed. Another case of comparatively recent date happened in Alverbrode, Hanover. An older spinster, daughter of the widow Stengrob, had a brother who suffered from attacks of asthma. Her mother was blind and lame, and her sister had died of consumption. Some people in the village suggested that the attacks which came upon her brother were due to witchcraft, and at last the old spinster herself declared she was a witch and described her relations with the devil in the minutest terms. She was convinced herself that she had bewitched her mother and sister and could injure people by a mere glance. Anxious about the welfare of the villagers, she warned them to avoid her and tried to drown herself during an attack of melancholy, but she was rescued and imprisoned. The physician, a sensible and humane man, declared, judging from bodily symptoms, that she suffered from a disease which had confused her mind, but she could not be prevailed upon to submit to treatment. She insisted that she was as healthy as a fish and that the devil could not be driven out by medicine. She said, "It is in vain to try to cure a witch. I deserve death and shall gladly die, but please do not burn me. Have me dispatched with the sword. Everything will be well when I am dead." Thereupon the physician resorted to a stratagem. He persuaded her that her neck was sword-proof, and succeeded in inducing her to take medicine to make her neck soft again for decapitation. She was then treated according to the prescriptions of her physician, with bodily exercise and regular diet and sleep, until her mind improved, and she forgot all about witchcraft and her sword-proof neck. Christian Alzenreiter, a student of Passu, palmed off upon credulous soldiers for making them bulletproof a slip of paper upon which he wrote, "Devil help me, body and soul I give to thee." The paper had to be swallowed, and Alzenreiter claimed that he who would die of it within 24 hours would go to hell, but he who survived would be bulletproof all his life. A Saxon colonel had been hit twice during his military career by a bullet, but in each case a Mansfeldthaler had protected him. This incident gave rise to the notion that Mansfeldthalers make one bulletproof, and there was no officer in the imperial army during the Turkish wars who did not carry at least one of them about his person. The price of Mansfeldthalers at that time was 15 times their face value. Various kinds of magic wands and divining rods, which were supposed to indicate the place where treasures lay hidden, were made in great quantities. There are innumerable magic formulas and exorcisms, most of them invoking God or the Trinity or Jesus Christ in Hebrew or Latin. Especially the words Yahweh and Adonai play an important part and were believed to be very effective. Among the magic symbols which are met with in old documents, the triangle, the cross, the pentagram, and the signs of the planets are preferred. But other figures such as squares, hexagrams, circles, and fantastic combinations of irregular lines are also quite frequent. Conjurations were made according to various prescriptions. A circle was drawn at midnight where two roads cross. It was lit with wax candles made after specific recipes. The conjurer had to prepare himself by fasts and prayers, sometimes by partaking of the Holy Communion at church, and when at last he failed to find the treasure or to accomplish his purpose, whatever it may have been, he had reason to believe that he had some trifling mistake in his preparations. The most fashionable method of predicting the future was the casting of horoscopes, which still served astronomers in the 17th century as a means of making a living. Kepler, who enjoyed the confidence of the superstitious Emperor Rudolf II, felt the deep humiliation of his position, but he bore it with good humor. As we know from himself, he writes, quote, "Astrology is indeed a foolish child, but good gracious, where would her mother, the wise astronomy, be if she had not this foolish child? Is not the world more foolish still? So foolish, indeed, that the old sensible mother, i.e. astronomy, must be introduced to the people through her daughter's foolishness. But when guesses are limited to yes and no, one has always about half the chances in one's favor. Right guesses are remembered, failures forgotten, and so the astrology remains in honor." End quote. One reason why there was always so many fools who, in spite of their fear of eternal damnation, tried to make contracts with the Prince of Darkness was the prevalent idea, illustrated in many old legends, that it was quite possible to shirk one's obligations. Indeed, God and all the saints were supposed to be always ready to assist people in cheating the devil out of his own. As an instance that characterizes this belief, quite common in the Middle Ages, we quote the legend of Saint Gertrude, an old German poem of unknown authorship. Quote, "A knight was stricken by poverty great. His goods he all had wasted, and gone from him was his whole estate. Such bitter wasn't he tasted, that to take his life he intended. He rode to the forest dark and dim, but there the devil waited the knight and said to him, 'Thou shalt be reinstated if thou wilt assist me in secret. I'll give thee chests full of glittering gold in exchange for thy loving maiden. Then canst thou live well and free and bold until thou diest. Well laden with joys shalt thou be while living.' And happy was the maiden fair, the new wealth her heart delighted. 'But say, my lord,' she asked, 'from where do the riches come?' Then affrighted was the knight at her look and her query. 'O lady dear, wilt thou ride with me through a forest green and pleasant? The birds of the forest there play in glee, and the songs are now heard incessant which gaily the birds are singing.' Together a green forest they reached, and near the road was standing a little chapel, where men beseeched Mary, whose arms were expanding to all, our worthy mother, our lady. To the knight the maiden said, 'Let me here stop in pious feeling in the chapel to pray an Ave Maria.' At the altar she was kneeling, with her arms acrosswise folded. She there fell asleep, forgetting her care, and Mary stepped forth from the altar, and to the knight she came blooming fair, in her hand bearing rosary and psalter, and mounted as if it were the maiden. They both reached soon, in the forest dense, the crossroad where the devil was standing. His rage on seeing them was intense. 'Thou hast cheated me,' he was demanding, 'thou treacherous liar, thou trickster. Thou hast promised to bring here thy lady fair, and thou bringest the Queen of Heaven? Why, her I cannot my conquest share. From her presence I must be driven, yea, driven from her forever.' Said Mary, 'Thou evil spirit, away with thee. To thy fellows thou shalt be given. The lady thou must leave with me. My son's kingdom she shall live in, now and forever. Amen.'" Footnote. Translated by E.F.L. Gauss from Deutscher Lindenhort. End of quote. What charms the idea of magic exercises upon a man's mind may be learned from the fact that even Goethe, one of the clearest-headed men of modern times, passed through a period of his life, as we know from his Wahrheit and Dichtung, in which he pondered upon the possibility of occultism. Reminiscence of this kind found classical expression in his ballad The Treasure Digger, which, on account of its practical beauty and sound moral lesson, deserves to be translated and quoted. The treasure digger speaks, quote, "Sick at heart, poor in possession, dragged my days unto the latest. Poverty is of curses greatest, riches are the highest good. And to end my sore depression, I went forth to dig for treasure. Thine my soul be at thy pleasure, I wrote down with my own blood. Circle within circle drawing, wondrous flames I then collected unto herbs and bones selected, and conjured a spell of might. Then, in manner overawing, as I'd learned, I dug for treasure. On the spot I found my measure. Black and stormy was the night. And I saw a light's formation brightening to a star's consistence, coming from the farthest distance, just as struck the midnight hour. Vain was further preparation, and a beauteous youth, with glowing splendor from a cup overflowing, spread a flash with searching power. Yet his eyes my soul delighted, 'neath a wealth of flowers tender, with that cup of heavenly splendor. Stepped he in the magic ring, friendly meat to drink invited, and I thought, this youth so purely offering gifts of heaven surely cannot be the evil king. Courage drink, and life's pure pleasure, quoth he. Learn from this occasion that by anxious conjuration no boon can this place afford. Dig no longer for vain treasure, work by day, and guests at leisure, toilsome weeks and feast days' pleasure, by thy future magic word. Footnote. This is most likely the poem of which Schiller writes to Goethe in a letter date May 23, 1797. He said, "It is so exemplary, beautiful, and round and perfect that I felt very forcibly, while reading it, how even a small whole, a simple idea, can give us the enjoyment of the highest by perfect presentation." End of footnote. The height of folly that the belief in a religion of magic is capable of was actually attained in the persecution of men of science whose doctrines came in conflict with tradition. Not only religious reformers like Savonarola and Huss were condemned to be burned alive and to die a heretic's death, but also thinkers like Giordano Bruno. Galileo, at the age of 70, was imprisoned and surrendered to the Inquisition at the demand of Pope Urban. Threatened with torture, he was forced to recant publicly the heresy of the motion of the earth. Footnote. The most thorough exposition of this sad chapter in the history of civilization is found in President Andrew Dickens White's 2-volumed work of A History of the Warfare of Science with Theology in Christendom, New York, 1896. End of footnote. The religion of miracles had, in the natural course of evolution, become the religion of magic. The religion of magic had proved to be a belief in witchcraft, and the belief in witchcraft had brought forth the terrible fruit of witch prosecution with all kindred superstitions, among which the hatred of science was not the least injurious to true religion and the highest interest of mankind. The belief in witchcraft ceased naturally with the ascendancy of science. The more Christianity became imbued with the scientific spirit of the 18th century, the rarer became the faggot, and the fires were at last extinguished forever. So long as Christianity was interpreted as a religion of magic, nothing could stop the terrible mania for burning witches, neither the fear of future punishments for the tortures inflicted upon many innocent victims, nor the pangs of conscience that were now and then felt by the judges, nor Christian charity and love. There was only one remedy, viz., a clear insight into the nature of things, revealing the impossibility of witchcraft. But that one remedy afforded an unfailing cure. End of chapter. Meet me at the next video as the author will get into the Inquisition. There's going to be a section there that's just so painful to listen to, and I can't imagine, as the author was trying to spare us all the goriness, but just couldn't help but to give us one demonstration of how ugly that Inquisition really got. And with that, we will continue in the next video, The History of the Devil and the Idea Evil by Paul Carus. Please do, if you haven't done so yet, hit the like button, share this with